Alrighty, I guess we will go ahead and get started. Is it okay for me to start? Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Lamont Orange, and I am Websense's Chief Information Security Officer. And within my role at Websense, I have the responsibility of securing a security company. So there's a lot of interesting stories, some of which we'll talk about here, some of which we can talk about later, of how you do that. We have Websense, we have a global presence. So securing a security company is not as simple as abiding by some of the things that we have to do in the US. We have to worry about the EU and the variety of countries across the pond that don't respect, say, their data privacy laws or their monitoring and control laws, and just the ability to manage our networks. So that makes it very, very interesting. And like yourselves, we are also challenged with doing more with less. Just because we're a security company doesn't mean we have access to those unlimited resources, whether they're human resources or whether they're fiduciary resources. So instead of having to, I guess, pitch my conversation about security in the terminology that the business understands, well, the business is security, so they definitely understand that. What I have to do is challenge a dollar for the security internal program against securing or making our products better. So same challenges to some degree, different conversation because everybody understands security. But again, same challenges around resources and money. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is how to use the kill chain as a way of expressing the positioning of your security program, as well as looking at how you can utilize that to understand where the gaps are in your security strategies and the tactics that you're using, and moving forward to identify the data that you really care about and how you protect that. So with that, take you down memory lane a little bit. We used to talk about the perimeter being how many firewalls we can put in place, and once we have those firewalls, those IPSs, we just keep changing them out, getting better. And that was the perimeter. We crossed our fingers and hoped that nobody got past the perimeter. Because if they did, in most cases, we might not see them. AV was as good as AV was and as good as it is today. It's signature-based, you know, kind of thing. Whatever it is, and we've seen in the past, that's what it's going to protect. What we see tomorrow, it has no clue. So when you talk about how we have evolved as organizations, we no longer have that perimeter. We don't have that four walls anymore. Security is not in a position where they can say no. If they are in a position of saying no, then you see that constant change out of individuals because they're trying to find somebody that'll say yes and take the blame for it when something bad happens. So you have a landscape of where those walls are starting to disappear. So perimeter is something that's assumed that you have because it's everywhere. Now what do you do once you're inside of the organization or you're dealing with this borderless economy? How do you embrace that? And when you focus on, you know, we don't care about location anymore. We don't care about the device anymore. Network we've already challenged. We care about users and we care about data. And in some regard, we're evolving now to where we don't necessarily care about the user. We just care how they're using the data. The data is your commonality at this point. So here's our challenge. We as human beings, we hate change. So we have a lot of changes going on in our economy today. We have changing in threats. We have highly skilled adversaries today. They tend to be able to get together and say how they are going to try to tear our defenses apart and use our defenses against us. We, on the other hand, without the right paper in place, we can't share information and get together and figure out a method of how to stop these adversaries. So that's a little bit of a change for us in what we're used to. They do it for money. They used to do it for fun. So that's changed a little bit for us. We have the change in IT demands. IT, more with less. Let's take everything to the cloud. I don't want to have to worry about it. We can have the cloud worry about it. You know, we're shifting risk, shifting burden. You know, we're looking for the always on philosophy, 100% uptime, even with maintenance. So the whole 4959 thing is out of the window at this point. It should never go down, even with maintenance. Different world we're living in today. We have changing business requirements. The business wants to do everything. The business wants to do what they want to do. If you say no, when you turn your back, they're figuring out a way around you. So you have to plan for that. You have to understand where they want to go. We have to change the way we're thinking as security leaders to talk in terms of the business so that they understand what some of our concerns are. And we also have to not only tell them no, we tell them yes. You can do it, but I would suggest you do it this way. So when you plan for your $100 million project, add $1 million in for me. Should be a rounding error, you know, kind of thing, so that we can get what we need out of it and make sure that we are securing our environment and protecting the company at the end of the day. But you got to talk to them in terms of those business objectives that they're trying to achieve. That's the language that resonates. I think for so many years we've tried to make the business understand us instead of us understanding them. I'm not saying one way is right or wrong, but I am saying that one way to get ahead of this is to get to a point where you're speaking a common language. So this is the one thing that I know as security leaders, we probably all hate this question. You know, what are your challenges? What keeps you up at night? All those types of things. It can lead you down to many, many paths. In my prior life, when I was a security officer at one of the largest cable companies in the country, they asked me what kept me up at night when I would talk to my security business partners, and I would give them a variety of things, nothing which had to do with security. But that's the question that continues to exacerbate our environment. What keeps you up at night? That's not the right question to ask. What challenges do you see in your environment? And when you start looking at this mountain being built, do a lot of these challenges resonate with you? I mean, you hear about spearfishing. Okay? It's definitely a vector that is utilized to exploit an organization. But the one thing that you don't hear about spearfishing is how some of these organizations, organized crime organizations, are getting more creative. I can tell you an example where this company, this organization, well, they couldn't figure out how to get in the company through traditional means. Or they took the path of least resistance, where a lot of IT security people, and please don't take this the wrong way, but we're a little lazy, myself included. We'll take the easiest path to some degree. So why would I want to beat up and hack against your firewalls when I have the stream of data that shows me that several people, let's say out of a 15,000 person organization, 12,000 of them go to a very, very popular Chinese food restaurant site on a daily basis? Why would I try to come at you directly when I can go that way and then come back at you? And that's what they did. They spearfished them from the website. That's that's untraditional. We're used to a spearfish coming through an email, not through something that we go view to satisfy our need to satisfy the hunger need. So they're getting creative. They're thinking about using our patterns, using that information that they have access to against us. We also have top management visibility. We as security leaders sometimes have a very difficult time communicating the value of the services we provide because the executives don't care about. We blocked 1 million pieces of spam today. 96% of the mail that was delivered to the organization was dropped, so we only got 4%. They could care less. They'll tell you I still got spearfish. So what did you do about that one? You know, it always focused on what you didn't do versus what you did. So how do you communicate the effectiveness of your security program to your executives? Cloud. We're running to the cloud. What does that mean? Do we have the right paper in place to make sure that our data is secure in the cloud? Do we even know where the cloud is? That's the other portion that a lot of people don't know. Where is the cloud? Our data is in the cloud. What does that mean? Kind of thing. And how do we protect it? Do you protect the backups? Do you protect the third-party access? You know, there's a lot of questions that have to be answered around securing the cloud. The advanced threats, that's another big buzzword of what we hear in the marketplace today. And what I'll say is I I like to really qualify and call everything the advanced threat, because that's typically what it is. The slow and low, mentality, or the locking and loading of different types of exploits and making them morph along the path that they're exploiting you. I don't believe in the advanced persistent threat, because APT is more of a buzzword for we didn't see it. We can't get to the root cause of it. It's like having a cold to some degree. You can take all the NyQuil you want, but the whole thing about it is it got cold outside. You didn't wear a cap. You got a virus. That's the root cause of it. We need to start thinking in context of how we are protecting our networks, our data, our users. Let's find out what the root cause is. APT just by itself indicates that we are not attacking the root cause. We are attacking systemic anomalies in our environment. And what that means is that still every third Thursday, something is going to happen, and it'll go away on Friday. Magic, sunspots. That's what an APT is, because we didn't find it. Mobile devices and users, a lot of this goes on and on and on. Some of it is the insiders. We forget about them. They're with us. We spend a lot of time and energy trying to protect people on the outside from coming in. The insiders are already in, and the majority of the time when they take from us, they do it on our time and not their time. So their lunchtime is their lunchtime. Their work time is their theft time. So you think of it in that context. So we've talked a little bit about this. Bad guys are smarter. They're better financed than they've ever been. They're motivated by the money. They're motivated by taking our IP. They're motivated by hurting our business. And the other thing that we have a problem with is that we're outnumbered. We can't get organized because maybe we don't have the right paper in place. Maybe we're afraid of some FISA order. We're afraid of some privacy component. We got to get beyond that in order to position ourselves to win some of these battles and later win the war, because they're already ahead of us in some of that context. So here are some of the things that we know. We have to have intellectual property protection. Just by a show of hands in the room, how many people believe they have IP? There's a lot of people in the room that don't have IP. Interesting. We got to get to a resemblance of that. And you're not very uncommon if you believe you don't have IP. I've talked to many CISOs in my travels, nationally, internationally. They don't think that they have IP because, hey, we just put stuff together and we make this widget. Or we just have a bunch of information about residents. That's not necessarily IP, it's just information. Well, it is IP because it's a core part of your business. It's a core part of your operations. If you're running a state government, if you're running a local government, running a federal government, it's a core part of that. That's your IP. If something was to happen to it, could it put you out of business? I would say probably so. Can it rock public confidence in you? Pretty much. That's a general term of IP, something that can really hurt. And you have to protect that. We know data theft and espionage is on the rise. We hear about Russia. We hear about the Chinese. That's a real clear and present danger. We hear about some of the attacks. I don't know if you had the opportunity to read some of the articles in dark reading about ISIS. They think ISIS wants to attack our power grid. That's not necessarily data theft, but it's definitely espionage. They want to hold our power hostage from us until we leave them alone. With containment and defenses, we generally lack that in this particular point in time. We don't either we don't know, we don't see it, or what's happening on our network, but can we stop it? And if we believe we've stopped it, how do we know? Bring your own whatever, is definitely something that we have to talk through and figure out what our policies and practices are going to be for that. And it's just more than just the devices. We're talking Internet of Things, the wearables, medical devices. All of that stuff is going to come into play, what we do with it. And cloud applications, etc. What does that mean from a device standpoint? What does that mean from a data standpoint? Those are the things that we know we have to consider in our security programs. Here are a lot of things that we do. Now this is where we come into human era. We like to reply all. That works for just about everything except for when we didn't mean to send it to them. You know, we don't review what's being monitored. We're getting inundated with so much data these days. And just with the onslaught of Internet of Things, the data problem is going to get worse. So how do we make sense of it all if we can't make sense of it today with the small amount that we have? We have to figure that out, how to become more actionable. We allocate inappropriate access. That's a big one too. Easy button. In your procurement in your onboarding organizations, when you bring an individual on to your company, how many of you make them look like me? So when you do to make it look like me, most likely that person's over entitled. And how do you know that they're using their entitlements correctly? Because they shouldn't have access to it anyway, but they may have figured out they do. How are you tracking that? You know, need to have versus must have. They're all one and the same. And some of it's due to the changing of the workforce that we don't understand. There's this group of the workforce called millennials. I think if you go through the baby boomers are the people that were born in the 50s, and then you have the generation X and Ys. I think I am generation X. We all work different than the millennials that are coming aboard today. I've talked to security leaders and say, well, we have a hard time hiring security analysts out of college. We're paying them $60,000+ a year to do this. We're in the defense industry. You would think it would be something that they want to do. But they're telling me that I won't take your job because you gave me a BlackBerry. Shows that you are not technologically astute if you're giving me out a BlackBerry. Now, keep in mind, you are a college student just graduated. You can really buy your own phone and figure that portion of it out. That's the work phone. Do whatever you want to do at that point. But that's a different work ethic, different mentality. They don't want the office. When we all came to work, we wanted to work for the office, so we have some place to put our pictures, some place we could set up and know that nobody's going to do anything to us. You know, lock it up when we leave, and it's the same when we come back, because we want to spread our stuff out. No, they want to collaborate, because they say they get more work done when they talk to their peers and sit out in the open and do those things, and we think they're having fun, and supposedly they're actually getting more work done. It's just another mentality. And that comes back to needing the access. I need to have access to everything that I might need access to just in case I need it. Over entitlement. So what do we do with that? How do we secure environments where we are working in such a diverse workforce like that? We have to figure that out, and we have to take that into consideration, because that is a real operations of how things are working today. And that turns into the insider to some degree, the insider. Insiders normally, the profile, the person that gives us 200%. They're our go-to person in the organization. They got a bad review. They didn't get the promotion that they thought they wanted. They got a 1% raise instead of a 5%. Now they got to think about it. You just don't love me. You don't like me. You don't value me. So I'm going to take my stuff that I created and I'm going to take it over to the next place. How do we know? Those are the things that we have to think about. So when we talk about the revenue and the budget, this is very important about how to communicate. That we're understaffed, we're under-resourced, we're under-financed. We need to put more money into our programs. We've spent 80% of our budgets on that perimeter type defense that we are already assumed to have. We have 20% on average room of innovation. And when you look at that small dot, which I made it bigger for visual perspective, because we are a small, even smaller dot inside of that IT budget a lot of the times. But when you look at that small dot, 20% of a dollar is still only 20 cents. How many of us can buy security solutions that can protect our environment with 20 cents on the dollar? We can't put our money in the right places. Therefore, we have to figure out how to communicate that we need to get some of the big blue money allocated to protect the organization to make that dot just a little bit bigger. Because I don't want this money right here. I want the big blue money. So when we talk about the change, our challenges, we see the landscape has changed too. Signatures, more 0 days than ever before than we've seen in 2014 as a security organization. We have the mass distribution. We have the slow and low, no more high volumes. A lot of us look at bandwidth usage and say, okay, if you're at this bandwidth, this is our normal. I'll give you a 10% rise, and if it's over 10%, then we have a problem. I need to investigate it. It's actually the reverse, because they're coming in. It's slow and low. So they're coming in through our normal bandwidth patterns. They won't rise. It's just they're changing the traffic patterns within the normal. Taking those HTTP packets, those TCP packets, those UDP packets, and using them for their benefit. Using our defenses against us. That doesn't necessarily cause a traffic rise. No one comes in and take all of your data at one time. They take it over a period of time. That's usually the motive. So you won't see it. When you look at the attacks in malware and forensics, we pretty much, very much had hands-off approach back in the 80s and 90s. Because we had antivirus, and we had endpoint, and it was all good. Now we definitely have hands-on. Most of us in this room probably have a SIM or a SIM-like tool. And we're combing through data looking for the anomaly. And hopefully we pick the right one, because the SIM doesn't have any intelligence in most cases. If you're looking for SIM 2.0, 2.5, or 3.0, or whatever the new buzzword is, they're trying to put some intelligence into the SIM so that it can actually point you to the right direction, that there's a problem. We have to move to proactive, because if we cannot understand what the norms are in our security posture and what our risks are in our environment, we have no way of stopping them. We'll stay in this reactive state. The data will keep leaking. We'll continue to see more of the credit cards. We'll continue to see more of the PII and the confidential information leaking out. We got to be able to understand where data is, who's using it, how they're using it. And that's not just so much from a user standpoint, it's also from an application standpoint. Our applications now are smarter than they've ever been. They call other applications. They call other systems. They call other ecosystems. We have to know if that's normal, because that's another way and another attack vector that's coming at us. Our iPhones, our Droid phones, we got cool apps, you know, Angry Birds and all this other stuff. Angry Birds is also mining our angry bank accounts and sending our credentials out. As that bird is flying and you pulling the slingshot back, so is your money flying with him in some cases. We don't know. And those same devices sometimes have our corporate data on it. So when we look at a timeline and what I call past and present, I've spent some time in government entities, and I think from my perspective, this is where we've evolved a little bit. We went from a closed type of network systems where we only had to share with the building agency that we were in and that we worked with, and all was good. We didn't care what the state did. We didn't care what the Capitol did. We know we just had data hanging out there, and it was all fine. We didn't need to share. Then came with, hey, it'll be great if, you know, the state maybe or the local government can provide services to the other organizations. How about the school district supply internet for the fire department? You know, just running through all those different types of scenarios, and we start getting agencies again that's wanting to share with the Capitol, that wants to share with services and civic groups. How do we do that securely? You know, we're cross-pollinating the same information to some degree. And I think now with the cybersecurity framework and some of the pushes from the federal government, it's more turned toward ecosystems. I'm gathering that you're probably hearing that word more than you used to. Let's open up everything. Let's get the cloud involved, because if we all put information in the cloud, California can share information with Michigan, and we can get better data and better refinement of that data. We can also share with the federal government. Oh, let's just open it up to some of the other states. Let's open it up to the residents, because the residents need to maybe consume services for us. Hey, let's be an ISP for the government. Let's do public Wi-Fi and tie it all back into the government systems, because we can get a grant, we can get money, and then that helps us with our roads. There's all kinds of ways that we're getting there. But these are these ecosystems where we are in the present that we have to account for. You know, emergency management systems, that was the latest buzzword as well. Most of them are antiquated. Should something happen, well, we didn't know that it didn't do this. Or we haven't used that in such a long time. We don't have enough bandwidth. We don't have enough frequency. This county doesn't share with this county. Well, we got to take care of that. Some of that is more conventional wisdom, and we got to take care of that. Let's share all of that stuff. Let's share that information. So how do we do that securely? Because now we're dealing with public interest, and we're looking at the trust of the public to make sure that we handle this data appropriately. It's great that we're doing it because the communities will feel better. But should we lose a name, a social security number, a license plate number, or something like that, it's baptism by fire then. Why would you do something like that? So no good deed goes unpunished, as they say, so let's try to make sure that the good deed that we're doing has a limited amount of punishment associated with it. The other thing is that we have business and risk factors that we're looking at that are different than they were today. You know, we have the level of impact is really greater for we have cloud breaches, data loss via social adoption. A lot of organizations are getting more into the social world as well. Facebook, Twitter, you name it, using it to promote whatever they're doing in their organization, a way to communicate with their constituents. Mobile breaches, malware inside a threat, you know, and then you have these initiatives for governance and visibility. Let's make sure that we're operationalizing our IT spend and our security spend. Adoption of cyber security frameworks to make sure we have a way of securing our environments and a way of reporting what we're using, what standard we're using to secure it, because hopefully that'll help us in the case of a civil suit. We're trying to embrace this concept of ecosystems. We got to remove that data noise. Again, we're getting so much data today, getting inundated. How do you make sense of what's in the SIM? How do you make sense of what's in the SIS log? How do you make sense of what's in the application log to tell us that we have a problem? And then we have this overall movement into the cloud. Your cloud, my cloud, their cloud, our clouds together. You got to figure out how do we secure that? Because the risk is continuing to go up the more we put in the cloud. Yeah, it's less for us to worry about. We might sleep better at night, but then we got to think about what's happening while it's in the cloud. And then we start losing sleep again, and we got to figure out how do we get the data here in the cloud, know who's handling and who's doing what to it. So I think one way of looking at this is looking at it across a 7-stage model of a cyber kill chain. It definitely tells you a way to look at your security posture in simple terms that everyone can understand. Because when you look at stage 1 and talk about it, you're talking about recon. Recon is pretty clear as to what it says it is. I'm looking at you, I'm sending an email just to see if you will respond back and let me know that you're alive. So the address list that I have, making sure it's good. Done deal. Now we're talking about the lure. If you answer this survey, I'll give you $10, or I'll give you a Starbucks card, or I'll give you a $100 Amazon card. I got to do something to entice you. Or I know that you go to this Chinese food restaurant every day to the website. I'm going to give you a button to click on that says special. Everybody wants to save money. Now I got you. Redirect. This is where it looks like Google, sounds like Google. It's just missing 1 0 or 1 0. Kind of Google at that point. So now I have you in my world. Exploit kits. When we talk about that APT that I mentioned earlier, every third Thursday, that is part of the dropper file. I got an exploit kit. It's a time bomb. It's only going to happen every third Thursday of the month. And just to throw you off, I got a little bit of an algorithm in there that's going to learn. Maybe I'll move it to the third Wednesday just to keep you chasing your tail. Then we got the call home. This is the data line. This is that going to China, going to Russia, going to the house down the street, maybe. But it's definitely going out of your environment. You got to understand what that's doing. Or calling home to update that dropper file, update that zombie machine, update that algorithm. Now it's every third Tuesday, just to keep you going. And then ultimately is the data theft. That's that 7th stage. So you got to look at what are you doing and how can you identify which defenses that you have in each one of those areas. And in some cases, as you're moving horizontally, you need to understand if there are any gaps within those areas. So if you have one tool doing this, one tool doing that, If they don't share information with one another, then that's a gap, because they don't know what each other are doing and what each other are blocking. That's another vector for those organizations to exploit you. And what we found through our study with Websense Labs is that if you have something that has horizontal sharing, that you can eliminate, or you can minimize, you can never eliminate, but you can minimize your 0-day exploitability. When you look at the numbers up top that are scratched out, as you see, recon is recon. You can't stop anyone from basically casing you to make sure that you're alive and well. That's more of the human reaction. That's the only thing you control. But now we're talking solutions. It's always about people, process, and technology. So now you're talking solutions. Lure, if it understands it's a lure, it's a bad URL, it's a URL that was good on Friday, turned bad on Monday. Well, if you catch it, you can block 17% of those exploits just like that and be done with it. Where if you don't have that horizontal sharing, you're at 15%. So, you know, it's getting better. Redirect. If I understand that these two things, these two areas look very good going in, but this stage looked pretty bad, then I can stop that exploit. I gained 3% more. So far, looking better than I was. Because remember, the 70% was only good in the 80s and 90s. 70% still gets us to the range of target in some of the others today. We got to be better than 70. We got to be closer to 90. Actually, as closer to 100 as we can get, but 90 is more of the acceptable range. Because if you can get into the 90s, then you'll have your people in process to hopefully take you over the edge to your 95th, 96th vertical. Dropper file. Again, you're increasing. If you're sharing and know what these bad emails, these bad packets, and all these types of things contain in them. So you're increasing your security posture just by virtue of having a solution that shares information horizontally. It's a good way to map out what controls and defenses you have in your environment too, because generally every advanced attack is going through these 7 stages. You've seen some probably in Lockheed Martin as a 5-stage model. Some of the other organizations use a 3-stage model. At the end of the day, they're still the same stages to some degree. They are combining stages, if that makes any sense. Simple is better. There are 7 exploits to an advanced attack. Figure out what your controls are and what solutions you have in place. So we have to move to the next generation security model. And some of this is looking at threat patterns and kill chains. I haven't departed from my 7 stages. What I've done is added some more of what I talked about with the insider. There's always a turning point for your insider. Again, that's that bad review, and I'm just using this as an example. That's that bad review. You don't love me. You didn't give me the promotion. You don't value me, that whole thing. And then they start doing other recon on you. They're internal. Let's ping some systems and see if they respond. Let's see if I can get in because, you know, I'm an administrator. Maybe I have all the other powers of some of the other administrators. Or I moved from IT to finance. I still kept my IT power. Let me reset some passwords and help people out so that they don't have to go to the help desk. I'm just trying to help. But now I can help them by resetting some of my own passwords. And then we all ultimately get to data theft. And you do the same thing when you model attacks against web servers. It's a good way to model the attacks of your threat vectors. If you're looking at a web service attack or a web server attack, you're just talking about the recon, the exploit kit, drop a file, call home, and data theft. Great example. Still 7 stages. It's just not all of them may apply depending on what type of threat you're talking about. We need to look at behavior-based architectures. I'm not a fan of predicting behavior. I am a fan of understanding behavior. And understanding behavior of applications, understanding behavior of ecosystems, understanding behavior of how my data is used and where it's stored, more importantly. That's generally the challenge of a lot of organizations. Where do you store the data that you care about? You can name 3 places, but is there really 6? Some of which you don't know about. So it's understanding, having these different components to build a security posture that will allow you to move to that next generation model of understanding where your data and threats are from a behavior standpoint. The reason I am not a subscriber of predictive behavior is because the minute I know that you are quote unquote profiling me, I am going to do something different. So all of your analytics are out the window. You can't predict what I'm going to do now. But if you can understand what my norm is for my position function, and out of my norm, out of 365 days in a year, I pick 2 days to do something different. What's the significance? Or out of my 10 years of employment, I've always stayed in this swim lane, and I've been in the same position. My role hasn't changed. Why did my behavior change? Why did I start accessing data that I've never accessed before? Why did I send that data to Hotmail? That's why I say understanding behavior. These behavior-based architectures allow you to do that. So this was a survey that was conducted, it's actually 2014, Cyber Threat Defense Report for North America, Europe, by the Cyber Edge Group. And a group of CIOs, security professionals, I think the N was 649 that's up there, and they wanted to say, what are your concerns with cyber threats? The one that ranked very, very highly is 3.64. Data centers and virtual servers they felt are most prepared for a cyber threat. When you look at the lowest rank, mobile devices, smartphones, and tablets. Not surprised. Tablets and those devices are replacing computers and PCs, and we have very little visibility or controls around managing those devices and the applications that are on them. So this is still continuing to be our threat vector for exploitation, and one of the larger ones. Web applications is 3.27. It's in a yellow context because it needed to be over 3.5 according to the survey to be in an okay green state. But your web applications, going back to my restaurant example, that's very, very clear and present danger, because web applications not only take information, but they have the ability to invoke subsystems and ecosystems as well and become their own self-contained application. The other thing that this group did, they did a survey, again, of the same 649 individuals, saying, you know, what would adequately inhibit a cyber threat in your environment. And they really came back to that the lowest ranking was that they felt that there were lack of effective solutions in the marketplace. I think all solutions have some room for an opportunity for growth. I do believe that. There is no silver bullet. But there are solutions out here, and we have to look at solutions, again, I think, that have horizontal and lateral movement taken into consideration, because that's how we're going to get that intelligence across what's going on in our environment. The largest concern was security awareness. That's always a concern. I think to some degree we have to come outside of the box on that. The annual security awareness check-the-box training that nobody remembers after they've answered 50 questions is not effective. We have to do something a little different. And in my opinion, I think we have to go more of a guerrilla marketing approach to it. And what I mean by that is we have to take, you know, not reinvent the wheel, but take and make use of something that already exists. When you hear the Charmin jingle on the television, or the Bounce, or the Tide commercial, or the Coke commercial, that's because you've heard it about 18 to 20 times over the period of your years, at least that many. So you don't have to look at it and know that it's that. You have to make security something appealing to your user community and make them feel like that they are part owner in it. Use those system trays, pop-up boxes. Reward them, incent them. In my environment at Websense, if you find, we have a program called Catch of the Day. It can be a fish, it can be you saw passwords, somebody printed out passwords, left them on the printer. It can be generally anything in security. I stopped somebody today and asked them for their ID and found out that they didn't need to be in the building, kind of thing. And then you incent them. It's the cheapest security awareness program that makes for water cooler talk. You get to send people an accolade from the CEO of the company, and most of all, I give you a $100 gift card tax-free that's good in any place in the world. So I make it work for the EU, and I make it work for the US and all the other countries. Cheaper than what we do from the standpoint of some of the other point-and-click stuff. Because we spend a lot of time, money, and energy developing that stuff, and they don't retain it. So I say it's time for a change. We've been talking a little bit about that change and different ways of thinking. We need to use threat modeling. We talked a little bit about that in the 7 stages. There are lots of security threats out there, but you can get overwhelmed and inundated by them. So which ones affect your business and your organization? Let's focus on those and not focus on all the other things that are out there, because you get distracted. You got limited resources, limited budget. You can't attack them all. Remember that this is a journey. We're trying to get to a point where we had good security, and then we move to great security by actually doing something about it, doing the blocking, the actions, the metrics, the focus that we have in security. So it's a journey. We always have to remember that. We didn't get here overnight. We won't get out overnight. But we need to have a method of showing marked improvement of how our programs are progressing. There are some other things that we can do. We can move from a security operations mentality to a security intelligence. You hear a lot about that word intelligence in buzzwords in the marketplace today. But it really means that we have the right visibility, we're able to respond, we can predict where our vulnerabilities may be, which also lend to talking to our posture. We can put some prevention in those environments, and then that leads to intelligence. Right now, a lot of us have a bunch of data, and even if we have a SIM tool, we're hoping that we guess right, and if we guess right, then we have that intelligence. But if we guess wrong, then it was not the right interpretation of the data, which is where we need a little bit more help. That's more giving us some actionability, having some of those data scientists that are in different organizations and business partners that are helping us interpret that these are the right things to focus on in our environment. These are the right threats to try to mitigate. We got to get away from the operations standpoint, prevent, detect, respond. Now that's been around for years, and that's where a lot of organizations stay. It's more ad hoc in nature. Let's go get another tool and put it in place. And now we have 50 tools and 5 people. So they're just running and we can't do very much about them. But when we move to the intelligence side, we can talk about business enablement, which gets the business involved. And we can have threat-based discussions, which again are business level discussions versus all technological discussions, and throwing more things at the perimeter and hoping that it works. We can also talk about how to assess ourselves. And I don't have a pointer on this one, but if I was to use the pointer, that doesn't work. You will be able to assess yourself and put red, yellow, and green. Sometimes it's just that simple, the stoplight approach. Are we red in security awareness? Well, what are we going to do to make it yellow? Maybe yellow is just where we need to be from a business standpoint. Green, in a lot of cases, costs a lot of money. So we have to weigh that responsibility out there from the security leaders. Does it make sense to turn all of this stuff green in our environment? But have a method to build your security strategies on that show that where your marked improvement is going to be. So assess yourself and then report on yourself so that you know where you are versus somebody telling you where they think you are. And the last thing is to execute. It's all about the people, process, and technology. We want to get the first line of success, but I think a lot of us end up in burden to scale or either inconsistent operation. It's a very telling formula, but ultimately, this is where we want to be. We have to execute, show the return on investment of the funds that we were entrusted with to secure our environment. And with that, I thank you for your time and attentiveness, and I'll take questions if you have any. Well, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. I'm also available one-on-one if there's something that you want to ask.